let's discuss vacuum system setup. It's going to include a suction canister, vacuum tubing or suction tubing. You're also going to need a yonker, which we see there. We're also going to need a suction regulator, which you'll see there. With this particular setup, because you have different types of suction regulators, you'll need 2 sets of vacuum tubing for this setup. The one that I'm going to demonstrate for you only requires one particular setup. So let's go ahead and go over here to what we're going to be doing, and you may have to set up either one for your competency evaluation. You just want to make sure that you can do it. So you're going to have your suction canister, you're going to have your vacuum regulator, you'll have your suction tubing, and then you're going to have your tonsil tip suction device or yonker. Now the correct pronunciation, as I've been told from a student that I had from New Jersey, it's a yankower, but I guess maybe it's the southern roots or whatever. I've always heard it and have always referred to it as a yonker, but that can also be referred to as a tonsil tip suction device. In the hospital, when you get your suction canister is going to be, by this white cap will not be on the suction canister already. You'll want to make sure that you place the suction can. These are developed so that once this white cap goes on that suction canister, it's pretty much married to that canister from that point forward. I could probably get that off, but I'd have to break it in order to do so. These are single patient disposable canisters. It's got a little solidifying agent in the top, and there's also some solidifying agent packets that you can put in there so that when you whatever the contents you suction out of a patient might turn to a gel. But if you look at the top of this suction canister, you'll notice that you've got this area here that says for your vacuum source. You've got a relatively large opening here. If we can twist this around, you can see underneath here that this says patient for patient port. And then if I rotate this around, you'll see that that says tandem. You can set up multiple canisters in a series so that once this canister fills up, it would spill over into another, and so on and so on. That way you're not changing out the same canister. But for our purposes, we're just going to utilize one canister. You'll want to make sure that you place this white cap on top of the canister in of itself, and it'll click into place. Now I've already done that because this white cap's already been placed on, so unfortunately I can't video that. But just make sure that you press around all the edges so that the canister is on securely. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you utilize this cap to plug off your tandem port, and you also want to make sure that that huge hole is capped as well. So now that that's nice and tight, everything's tight and open, we'll be ready to go. You've also got a plug here that you can put your suction tube into. And then this is what you're going to apply your suction tube in, because this is going to be your 2 patient ports. So what you're suctioning from the patient will come from the patient through the vacuum tube and go into that area. We're fortunate in that this canister sits directly into the utilizes the diameter index safety system for vacuum. And if I turn this around, there probably should be VAC stamped. There it is. VAC stamped on that connector. So with this, I can take and select all that together. But we talked about the diameter index safety system. I'm going to take this off, and we're going to try not to have too much Blair Witch Project as we're moving forward. We'll go ahead and screw this to the wall, making sure it's going to the vacuum inlet. Turn this on, make sure that I've got vacuum, and I do have vacuum. So now I'll go get my suction canister that I've already capped off. We'll come back over here. I'm going to set this down. Set this down right here. That way I can utilize both of my hands. and I'll try not to obstruct your view too terribly much. So I can step off camera to this area here. But you take your canister, and then it'll screw into the bottom of this regulator. Then we'll take our vacuum tubing or our suction tubing, open it up, and you have two ends. They're the same. It doesn't matter which end goes to which. But keeping it clean, you wouldn't want this to touch the floor or anything to that effect. Take it out of its packaging, and then go ahead and press that on snugly, so that it fits relatively snug onto that fitting. Then we want to do a system integrity check. So in order to do that, what I'll do is I'll use a gloved hand to occlude the vacuum tubing, and I'm going to press the vacuum over to its max vacuum setting, the regulator over to its max vacuum setting. And if I don't have a leak anywhere, I should see that this lid caves in, letting me know that I've got an intact vacuum system. And I'll let off of it. You should see that the canister drops down a little bit. And I'll do it once more. All right, great. So I'll turn that off so that you can hear what I'm going to say. For our purposes, what your textbook gives, your vacuum pressure is going to be -80, or excuse me, -100 and -120 millimeters of mercury for it. So on this particular item, you've got 100 millimeters of mercury here. It shows up in the yellow zone, and then 120 is right there before you get to the orange color within this regulator. The color schemes, what have you, are going to differ depending upon which type of regulator that you utilize. But it's important to make sure that you set an appropriate vacuum pressure. That way you're not pulling too much out of the patient, or causing any type of mucosal damage or anything of that nature with excessive vacuum pressures. So what you'll want to do is make sure that you are, I'm going to demonstrate it two different ways. So if I leave the vacuum source open, or my vacuum tubing open, and I turn this on and I adjust my pressure to say I want it to be -100 millimeters of mercury. I can turn that to -100 millimeters of mercury, and I hope that in the video you can see this needle. This needle is sitting right on -100 millimeters of mercury. But once I occlude this, which is going to be when you occlude your suction channel port or what have you to apply vacuum to the patient, notice that it goes almost, it's at -170. So it's almost at 180. So by adjusting your suction pressure without this occluded, that's an inappropriate way to do that. So what I would do is I would ask you to go ahead and occlude this, and then you can adjust your vacuum pressure to where you want it. So if I set this at -100, which is the range in which we want it to be in, -100, and I'll check it once more just to make sure it goes back to -100. I can tweak it if I need to. It didn't need to. It stayed at -100. So now, anytime the suction port gets occluded, you can be rest assured that you're never going to get larger vacuum than -100 millimeters of mercury, because that's how you've set it. So then you can go ahead and apply your tonsil tip suction device or yonker, and you are ready to suction your patient. So this would be our vacuum, our suction canister setup competency. Now in the hospital, if you got someone that's thrown up, notice the channel on this tonsil tip suction device isn't that large. So it would be appropriate, if you've got some thick chunky stuff that you've got to suction from somebody, to just utilize your tubing. But hopefully you, as far as secretions and stuff are concerned, you should be okay with just your tonsil tip suction device. So I'm going to turn that off, and that'll pretty much finish us up. Additionally, one other thing before we get started, a lot of hospitals will have a plastic holster that this can be left in a sleeve. Some individuals will leave the sleeve in which it's packaged in, just because it's probably not best practice for this to be tagging up against the wall. Definitely not going on the ground and going back to the patient. It would be considered dirty. And it's going to sound nasty, but you also want to make sure that, you know, this should be for oral use only. Don't try to shove this down a tracheostomy tube or an endotracheal tube up the nose or anything to that effect. This really should be oral use only. I have seen in the hospital, you know, patients who have IV fluids, they get liquid feeds and stuff. So obviously, if they don't have a rectal Foley catheter in and they use the bathroom and the bed, most of the time that's going to be pretty runny. I have seen individuals take this to suction up number 2 out of the bed, and without changing the catheter, they go back in their suction oral secretions. Don't be the person that does that. If you find this on the floor or something, be a good respiratory therapist. Go get a brand new one so that the patient's got something clean being used for them. All right, that's it on that one.